In a world where voices are silenced,
Please.
one man refuses to lie down.
It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
He's been punted not once,
40 years they've been trying.
not twice,
You couldn't fire somebody if they were horrible, doing a terrible job.
but 3 times.
You're fired.
He doesn't tell you what to think, but gives you something to think about. Welcome to the Bonafide podcast with Luke Bonar. And he's not
All right, here we go.
done
Hold your ears, folks.
yet.
It's showtime.
What is this? What is going on? Are you okay?
On the O10 network,
Oh,
the TV show that stole Australia's virginity.
what?
Number 96. Channel 10,
I don't know
the
that.
most controversial television show in the history of Australian television.
Nah, no idea.
This is episode 96.
Oh,
It's a townhouse that's still there in Paddington, and it was the set for this really, really naughty, raunchy TV show where there were 6 flats. Downstairs was a laundromat and a deli, and on the right-hand side of the entrance was Norma's Wine Bar, and the story about all the characters that lived in this building and the interaction and the dramas that went on.
I have no idea, but it sounds interesting.
It was. It was the birthplace of Australia's first sex symbol.
Right.
Once again, a starlet that only had one name. You know how there's Madonna, there's Cher,
Yeah.
well, her name was Abigail. Google it.
I don't need to.
Anyway, and it was also the first ever TV show that screened a gay male couple.
Oh, there you go.
There was Duddles,
Right.
and Joe Hasham was the other male character. He went on to be the face and voice of electronic sales and rentals. He rang me one night from Hong Kong. He was listening to my show. Anyway, number 96.
There you go.
And if you can find the theme, are we allowed to play the theme?
Probably not.
Sneak it, see if we get in trouble. Ask forgiveness, not permission. Anyway, that was the theme music. Number 96. And it all finished with a big whodunit. There was an explosion. There was a bomb in the building.
Yeah.
Pat McDonald was in it. God, she was good. Dorrie Evans. Oh, Herbert dear, really? This Cleo magazine or whatever it chooses to call itself. I mean, really?
Okay.
Anyway, it was a great TV show. I wasn't allowed to watch it. I used to have to sneak upstairs to Mum's little AWA black and white and watch it there with the sound down real low so I could hear their footsteps if they come up, and I'd run back to my bedroom.
Yeah.
Because it was on late and it was very adult tone. There you go, number 96, episode 96. John Anderson is a former Deputy Prime Minister, leader of the National Party. He was in power during the Prime Ministership of John Howard. He's a farmer, and I spent some time with him the other day about where Australia's going, where the world's going, his thoughts on everything from Trump through to the petrol crisis, One Nation, everything. And he is a quietly spoken voice of reason. And I can't wait for you to listen to what John Anderson has to say. So he's born in 1956 and he's retired now, as I say. He's back on the farm, but he's an interesting character. And I think you'll like what he has to say.
Yeah. I listen because obviously I've edited that.
What did you think of him?
I thought he was good. I thought he was harsh, but maybe it's what, I don't know, people need to hear. I thought he was harsh but reasonable. I mean, there were some things I didn't completely agree with. However, I can understand his reasoning towards it, and I can understand why he made for a good leader for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, as I say, he was leader of the Nationals under John Howard, or with John Howard. Yes, he's an interesting bloke with some interesting things to say. If you agree, if you disagree, it doesn't matter. It's an opinion worth listening to from an elder statesman. I think he'd make a great ambassador. In fact,
oh yeah, definitely.
And in fact, I put that question to him. Anyway, you got to have a listen.
Yeah, well, what he said about Australian culture, I think, is interesting,
isn't it? Wasn't it? Yeah,
very interesting. And I think you'd have a very hard time getting Gen Z on board with that type of thinking. But I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, he does say that one of the main problems with assimilation and multiculturalism is that after the war, most of the people who came here were of a Christian background. And he thinks because I asked him, I mean, okay, if what do you think about immigration and who should we invite here? And anyway, wait till you hear. Yeah.
Interesting.
It is. Jonathan Kersley is the Sky News bureau chief in Washington. We'll have the latest on what's going on in the United States. My God. I'm going to get to that in just a second. And we'll talk fuel and other issues with Truckee Tuesday with Rod Hannafy.
We love the news. Something to think about. Something to laugh about.
Oh, yeah.
What did you make of Donald Trump's foul-mouthed Easter tweet?
Oh, we haven't even said Happy Easter to the listeners.
Happy Easter, listeners.
Good one.
And to everybody who's now got type 2 diabetes, there you go.
Yeah.
We've gone away from eggs and we're now on to bunnies and bunyips and...
Yeah,
And what about the controversy surrounding hot cross buns? Once upon a time, you had the standard...
Fruit scone, yeah.
Yeah, which I love.
Classic fruit scones are the best.
With the cinnamon top and the little...
Yeah.
Now you can get banana bread, carrot bread, kale, chocolate.
You can get everything. There's a matcha, green tea, hot cross bun. Look, we're a little bit more creative these days. Get rid of all your hot cross bun prejudice. What would your ultimate hot cross bun be? What do you think would make for a good hot cross bun?
Ham and pineapple. No. I'm only joking. I do have pineapple on my pizzas.
Yeah, but that's normal.
No, I would leave it. I could go a banana bread hot cross bun.
Really?
But it would have to be baked and hot, and the bun so hot that the butter melts.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Cold hot cross buns are blasphemous.
Would you go for a carrot cake bun?
Hells yeah, I would. Just imagine if that cross on the centre was the cream cheese frosting. That would be good.
Yeah.
That would be good. Anyway, back to Trump.
Donald Trump. So he said on Sunday night, Monday morning our time, Tuesday will be Power Plant Day and Bridge Day all wrapped up in one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the effing straight, you crazy bastards. Or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. Now, he said that he's going to bomb bridges, desalination plants and electricity plants. That is obviously targeting civilians.
Yes.
And a number of sources have said it is clearly a war crime. What's going on?
I don't know. It's.
Oh, then he said, and then he finishes it with praise be to Allah.
What?
That was how he finished the tweet.
He must be losing it. Who is allowing him to have access to his Twitter?
Well, this is the thing. And there are a lot of MAGAs who think exactly that way.
I know, but I do think that's changing though. I do think there are a lot of MAGA supporters that are
MAGA.
Well,
MAGA.
MAGA? I do think the tide is changing.
A lot of people, right-winged thinking people, think he's doing exactly the right thing. Mind you, he has sacked Pam Bondi, his Attorney General, who's been a great ally to Trump.
I know.
So there was a great meme. Is it a meme? A little cartoon that depicts something? Is
probably a meme, yeah.
Of Pam Bondi leaving her office at the White House carrying a box, and on the box it says redacted Epstein file.
I know.
Oh, where is she going to go now? She's based in Florida. She is facing all sorts of, not criminal convictions, but criminal accusations, and she may well be disbarred now that she's not the federal Attorney General. So we'll watch that space. Are your petrol stations operating? There's one on our corner that operates for a day, then for 2 days it's empty. It's the Ampol on our corner. Most of the petrol stations in our area are showing that they have fuel, but are they showing the correct price? Have they passed on the fuel excise cut? Drivers are being urged to dob in dodgy servos, not passing on recent fuel excise cuts. And there are some bad egg drivers that have been filmed filling up multiple jerry cans at the Bowser. New South Wales fair trading officers are now going to turn their attention to petrol station managers across the state and they're going to zero in on those reported by customers by not doing the right thing. They're trying to avoid price gouging. Now, let me make something really clear. Price gouging is not illegal.
Yes, I know. Doesn't mean that it's right.
No, it's not illegal.
Yeah.
You can charge whatever you want, and this is the world we live in. If there is supply and it's limited and demand is high, you charge. That's the way the capitalist system works. Should the government say you cannot charge more for fuel than X amount above in this price bracket?
Yes.
Do they legislate that? Because
Yes.
it's an essential, isn't it?
Yes.
Should they do the same with electricity prices?
Yes.
Should they do the same with water?
Yes.
Should they do the same with food, which
Yes.
is an essential?
Absolutely, they should. If there are no safeguards in place, then corporations whose only interest is themselves will be deceptive in this, because it's not just price gouging, it's deceptive pricing as well, where they say, oh, this is a discount, but really they just put the price up last week and made it look like it was a discount.
Well, Coles got done for that, and they're keeping an eye on Coles. But just let me tell you something else. July 1, later this year, in New South Wales, the ACCC and the government will have more power, and they are going to keep a close eye on food retailers that turn over $30 billion or more a year. So that's Coles, that's Woolies, it's Aldi. I'm not sure whether IGA turns over $30 billion a year, but and legislation comes into effect on the 1st of July, where the food retailers will be held accountable to the prices they charge. Now, obviously, false advertising is illegal, and that's where Coles got into trouble. The down campaign, where in fact they didn't come down, they put them up and down and put them back to where they were. That's one thing, but price gouging is not an illegal practice.
It should be. I feel like it doesn't need to be black and white. There should be rates, right? You can't put the price up by this % within this time frame unless these circumstances are met, right? There should just be like parameters in place.
Okay, so what do you put what about our roads? Let's look at Sydney and the tolls, all owned privately. The government would argue we could never have built those fantastic new freeways and highways without it going private, but you're held to ransom. And the government's allowed these toll operators to channel these roads so that it's almost impossible to get from A to B without using them. So should that be regulated?
Of course it should be.
Okay. What about rideshare operators that practice surge pricing when something popular is going on?
Yes.
Should that be capped?
Absolutely. You do know that they did make ticket sales in Australia for like concerts and stuff. We introduced essentially laws against price surging, because what you'll see in the States is that they do this dynamic pricing, right? Where depending on how many people want a ticket, the price will go up. Now we have laws against doing that. So the price of a ticket is the same no matter when you buy it or where you buy it from, right? I don't understand why this is any different, because we can recognize that it's not fair to put up the price of something, and we should have more scrutiny in place for essentials.
Essentials. Okay. That's food. Is it pharmaceuticals? Because we do subsidise our pharmaceuticals with the PBS.
Yeah.
Would you put a cap on housing? If our house goes up for auction, if we decide to sell, I want as much for it as I possibly can. I don't want bureaucracy to tell me, you can't sell your house.
Well, that's a bit more complex.
Okay, what about rental properties?
Well, again, that's a bit more
Supply and
complex.
demand. It's an essential.
I know, but that's a bit more complex.
I'm playing devil's advocate.
I know, but that's a bit more complex because our system has essentially made it so that your super is your house, where that shouldn't be the system.
So should we all just go and adopt China and Russia's philosophy, socialism and communism?
I don't know.
What do you think, folks? Let us know. Do you want government bureaucracy to tell you how much you can pay for something or charge for something if you have a commodity that is in big demand but short supply? Do you have a right in a capitalist society, a democracy, to charge whatever the market price is? I'll tell you one thing that happened. I was on air many years ago for Cyclone Lazi, and we crossed up to Queensland regularly during my shift for the latest. In fact, my boy Jacob panelled me that night.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, anyway. And we were getting reports of a service station in Rockhampton Pretty sure it was Rockhampton. Mm. And, of course, these Queensland areas were cut off by flooding,
Yeah.
trees, and a lot of these communities were completely isolated.
Yeah.
And there was a service station that was charging $20 for a bottle of water
Yeah.
because that was all there was.
That's wrong.
Oh, well, it wasn't illegal.
I know, but it's wrong.
No, well, they got run out of town because they're stupid.
Yeah.
All the locals outed them
Yeah.
and they did themselves a massive disservice.
I know.
But they were charging $20 for a bottle of Franklin's water.
I know. It's so wrong. It's so wrong.
It is wrong, isn't it?
That's not Australian.
It's un-Australian.
It is un-Australian.
Un-Australian, mate. Kelsey, let's dig into the inbox.
All right. So a couple of weeks ago, Luke, you asked what was the worst car you've ever owned?
Mm-hmm.
And Rachel commented on Spotify. She said, worst car ever owned by us has to be an EA Falcon wagon on gas. Also was an ex-taxi.
Yeah.
What's that?
Gas, LPG,
Oh.
liquid petroleum gas,
Oh.
and a lot of cars back then.
What, so they had like a fire brewing in their car?
No, it's a liquid gas, and it works a combustion engine.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay, and you had to have your car converted. So it could run on fuel,
Yeah.
petrol as you know it, or LPG. And nearly every taxi converted, because LPG back then was so cheap.
Cheap, yeah.
And people were converting, and then soon the price of LPG went up, and the novelty wore off.
Why don't we have cars like that anymore?
Well, we can go to James Ward next podcast or the one after, and we can talk about what happened to LPG. Now, hybrids and electric has taken over, but
When I think of LPG, I think of barbecues, like the stuff your barbecue has to use.
yeah, and what's in the gas bottle?
LPG, right? That's why I asked if like
And we have it here, and we send it overseas, and we buy it back at an
Stupid.
inflated retail price. I talked to John Anderson about that. Anyway, just getting back to you asked me, so I'm just telling you, a lot of cars and the taxis in particular, because it was cheap.
yeah.
And this is before electric cars. I wonder how many people out there still have LPG converted vehicles if they're really old now.
Are they more efficient? Like, do they do a good job?
They did a pretty good job.
Oh.
They were very quiet. They
Maybe
were clean.
they got driven out because it was too cheap.
I see what you did there. No, hybrids and electric cars have now completely superseded that. But one thing I do want to talk to James Ward about next time, remind me, is there have been prototypes of hydrogen cars that run on water.
I know, yeah, I've seen them, yeah.
Why can't we run cars on water?
Well, because the supercells needed to do all of this.
Yeah.
They're not easy to make. No.
Anyway, we've got plenty of water.
And expensive.
We're good, bye.
No, but it makes water. It's not run by water. Its byproduct is water.
But they run hydrogen. They run on water.
Hydrogen is not water. What's water
Hydrogen is the gas.
H2O. Water is hydrogen and oxygen mixed together.
James Ward.
Yeah.
There's a message from Josh.
Yes. He said, I would personally never own an EV car, but I don't think a tax on EV vehicles is probably the way to go. I would probably think that those people who have EV vehicles are going to be at a loss at the end of those vehicles' lives, as battery packs of them are worth more to replace than to buy a new vehicle. But in saying that, anyone who buys an EV vehicle must charge it from a renewable power source only, not out of the wall socket, i.e. they must have enough solar on their business or on their own to charge that vehicle without putting any more strain on the power grid. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah. James Ward.
Yeah.
Another one for James Ward. My dad used to have company cars, and this is back before the fringe benefits tax, and he was allowed to drive it home and keep it at home. I learned to drive on one of his company cars, a Toyota Corona SE station wagon, 1978. Mm-hmm. But Dad came home one day with a car that we thought was the flashiest thing we'd ever seen. It was only 2 doors. It was green, and it was the first car we ever owned with bucket seats. Mm. It was the worst car ever. It was a Leyland Marina, and it was forever breaking down. It is probably one of the worst cars ever produced. Leyland produced it to try and compete, I think, with the Ford Cortina. But it was just woeful. Woeful. Not the P76, not the big one. It was a little 2-door Marina.
Yeah.
And it was forever breaking down. You could not rely on it to get to school or wherever. It was just hopeless.
See, I've had so many shit cars, but I love them all. They were all bloody troopers, you know? They went on for ages.
Your mum's had a lot of cars.
Yeah.
She had a big Ford Falcon that she hated. When I knew your mum, when your mum first got her P's, she had a blue VW Bug.
Yeah, I know. And that's the car that I wanted. And then they changed the VW Bugs to look so freaking ugly.
Yeah, why'd they do that?
I don't know. They ruined that. I always wanted a Bug growing up.
Think of Herbie.
Yeah.
Herbie the Love Bug.
I know. That's what I wanted.
I am not looking this up. I think Herbie was number 53.
What number was
Herbie the Love Bug?
53. Oh, yes. You're so good. Pig's ear. Now, Luke, we've got a voicemail here. Are you ready for this?
Yep.
Hey, Luke. It's a long time since we've spoken. It's Swampy.
It's Swampy.
You know what needs to happen over this fuel? And we, as you well know, we live in the bush.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to have a ration per week, not pull up at the Bowser and have a ration on the amount of fuel you can buy in the rural situation. Once you're outside a certain distance from a major centre, you have a ration on how much fuel you can buy per week. One of the local big fellas was telling me the other day that he's not even sure how much fuel he can get delivered. And this guy's got 50,000 acres. Like, if the government doesn't step in and blokes like you don't start hitting the hammer, which you're already doing, everybody needs to be aware. And through with your radio history, you've got a big enough following to be able to set the wheels in motion. The pollies won't listen to blokes like me.
Swampy, good to hear your voice again, buddy. So Swampy's suggesting a set allocation on how much fuel you can buy every week, a ration. Well, we've said it before. You had certain days you could fill up. We had odds and evens back when number plates had numbers. What do our listeners think?
What is the fuel situation like today as you speak?
The government will tell you everything's okay, and we're negotiating with other countries to get tankers here to Australia. Trump will tell you that the Strait of Hormuz is going to be free and open by the end of the week. I don't know, Kelsey.
Yeah, I mean, I did see coming out today, there was a story about, and we've kind of spoken about this, farmers having to make gut-wrenching decisions about leaving their crops in the ground or taking them out because they don't actually have enough fuel to get it out, transported, do all that stuff.
It's diesel. The country runs on diesel. Exactly. I'm going to talk about that with Rod Hannafy. In fact, it's very pertinent you should mention that because my chat with Rod Hannafy covers that. So, Swampy, thank you for your feedback, mate, and it's really good to hear your voice. It's funny he should mention One Nation. Latest poll today shows One Nation's primary vote has surpassed Labor in Queensland.
There we go.
Now, there's 2 years for the next federal election, and these are just polls at the moment. There's a big difference between winning polls and winning seats.
Yeah.
But isn't it interesting that in Queensland, One Nation's primary vote has surpassed Labor and the Coalition. Is One Nation just a populist party, or are they here for good? And can they provide enough candidates to win seats? 2 years to find out.
I know. I'm not a One Nation supporter. However, I like the idea of someone mixing up Australian politics, right? Like I may not support them on their policies, but I do appreciate the fact that they're making some other people shaking their boots, and I can appreciate that.
I was just talking to our resident GP, Dr. Norrie, and he said, you know what, if One Nation, Libs and the Nats all got together, they'd win.
Probably at the moment, yeah.
You reckon the three of them could work together?
Oh, that is a whole, I don't know.
And remember, you need seats in the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
I've told you before, 150 seats, you need 76 plus one. Anyway, interesting times.
Yeah, very much.
Interesting times. What else we got?
Now, Luke, I posted a little sneak peek of your chat with Rod on the Facebook page, specifically about the part where you guys talk about the ABF, the Australian Border Force, and the NHVR joining forces, cracking down on dodgy overseas licenses, all that type of stuff. And I just wanted to read out some comments, some of what the people are saying about this.
Yeah, what are the folks saying, Kels?
What are the folks saying? So David said, people on student visas are allowed to work a certain number of hours per week.
20.
But I suppose driving an AB triple from Sydney to Perth and return is pushing the friendship just a little bit. I think most people would agree. Derek said, about time, but I believe truck driving should be classed as a trade and young people should be apprenticed and work their way through the classes, e.g. IR to MC, and nobody should get a HCMC license without a minimum 2 years rigid experience.
Put that to Rod next time.
Yeah. And Gray said, I had a driver that went missing. Turned out he left Newcastle for a few days to go to Darwin to hand in assignments to his professor. He wasn't invited back.
Seriously?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. That's what Gray said.
Crikey.
I know. Now, Luke, we got another message from Shazzy.
Yeah.
She said, hey, Luke, regarding fuel drive-offs and presenting your card before purchase, they are all over Australia. IOR pods, which are fuel management systems. I use them here in WA all the time. No going into the counter and buying crap. Some of them are cheaper too.
Yeah, but I do feel sorry for the proprietors of the servos. They're franchises.
Yeah, I know.
And they don't get anything out of fuel.
I know.
They survive off Kinder Surprises, Kit Kats, Violet Crumbles,
Surely that's not a viable business.
pies, milk, eggs, bread, and they get a lot of husbands out of trouble on Valentine's Day.
Yes, they do.
And Mother's Day.
They do.
The Mother's Day flowers.
I know.
You can't feel very special if you know you've got flowers from a servo.
I know. Now, Luke, Jonathan, who wrote
the songwriter.
The songwriter.
Yeah.
He's written us another song. I actually haven't listened to this yet.
Okay. Coming up, Jono, and a new song that he's written. It's another truckie song, and we're going to listen to it now, all of us, for the very first time.
You ever sit next to a truck at the lights and wonder what's going on inside? Or you just see something in your way?
Yeah. Let me listen to it.
Never think twice about the day.
God, you're a pain.
He's thinking about his kids and a weekend drive, heading up on your mountainside. Cool air rolling through the trees. No deadlines there, just time to breathe. Talking about teaching them how to ride. Little dirt bike running by his side. Helmet too big, but the brand's real wide. That kind of day keeps a man alive. Mortgage sitting heavy in the back of his mind. Fuel keeps climbing and he's running on time. Next low bridge, yeah, he's checking that height. Am I gonna clear it every damn night? You got your thoughts sitting in that seat, but he's carrying more just to move that fleet. I won't be a victim of the road I'm on. Won't let this road get inside my head. Same world out there, same hard view, but I choose what I hold on to. You see the truck when I roll on through, but there's a whole damn life in here too. You got your thoughts sitting where you sit. So does he? Don't.
What do you think of that,
I
Luke?
think that's fabulous.
I'll upload all the songs that were.
And you know what? I know something. I can hear Jimmy Barnes singing that.
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, I can.
Yeah.
Really like it.
We'll put the full. Because we've been getting sent quite a lot of songs recently,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'll put them all on YouTube so you can go listen to them there. But we've got some talented listeners.
I really
Oh, he's banging the table, folks.
I really like it.
He's really excited.
I really like it.
Yeah.
Well done, Jonathan. You're a star. Episode. Find the
Why does it have to be the longest intro ever?
it's instrumental. Can you play it? Can you play it?
No. I'm not. No,
Play it.
I can't.
Number 96 episode. Thank you for tuning in.
While he drinks from his cup, a Bonafide and busted, but you let him stick around. The Luke's chill
after all the Donald Trump tweeting and arm waving, threats, hyperbole or hyperbole, if you pronounce it that way, just exactly how are the American people feeling about Donald Trump and the US involvement in Iran? And now Donald Trump is saying he'll back out. He's also saying Iran wants a ceasefire. Iran today are saying, no, we've never said any such thing. The United States, obviously this week, urging countries, NATO countries and the US allies to go and buy their own oil, go to the Strait of Hormuz and just take it, were his words. And Australia has replied, well, kind of. It's a difficult diplomatic dance. You dance around Donald Trump because you never quite know whether he's joking or whether it's a bluff. Now he's saying that he's quitting the NATO military alliance, which is, it's over 70 years old. Exactly what is Donald Trump thinking at the moment with the midterms coming up in November? Is he now concentrating on domestic policies and trying to get out of this international catastrophe? Just what's going on? Jonathan Kersley is the Sky News Bureau Chief in Washington. He joins us again. Jonathan, we can't thank you enough for keeping us informed.
Luke, always good to speak with you and the listeners on today from the grounds of the White House, what is going to be a huge day in the terms of the conflict with Iran and in terms of, as we've already heard from the US president today, there could be serious consequential matters for the NATO alliance. More than 70 years in the making, Donald Trump's now saying he is very much considering taking the United States out of that alliance. So, look, what is going to unfold over the course of the coming hours is going to be extraordinary. President Trump is due to address the nation, due to address the world on what the White House is saying is an important update on the war with Iran. So it's going to be a case of watch this space, wait and see what the president has to say, but mark this day, it will be consequential.
It's 77 years old, the NATO coalition, 32 members now, and the US military matters immensely to that, doesn't it?
The whole idea of NATO essentially came in the aftermath of World War II. It was all about Europe and the United States and Canada protecting each other in the event of any such catastrophe. Now, we've heard a lot of talk and we hear a lot of talk about Article 5 of NATO, which goes to the core of this alliance because it is basically says an attack on one is an attack on all. So it says that if somebody is to attack a NATO member, then all of the NATO nations will join forces and will respond. Now, the only time that has actually ever been invoked was in the wake of September 11, when the United States came under attack and the NATO nations came to America's defense. What we've seen over the course of not just this conflict, but wind the clock back to Donald Trump's first term of the presidency, because he was widely critical of NATO. He does not like the alliance and the reliance he sees that other nations have on the United States of America. So he has driven them to try and invest more. He's forged relationships with the likes of Mark Rutte, now the Secretary General of NATO. But right throughout this conflict, he's been hugely critical of them, saying they haven't come to America's aid. Britain and France in particular, he's been very direct with over his aggression towards them and frustration towards them. And that has not been well received. I mean, for all of the sort of public-facing diplomatic dancing, if you like, there are huge amounts of frustrations from the countries he is criticising. And remember, he criticised Australia too in amongst all of this as well, saying Australia wasn't doing enough. Australia had said no to a United States. What he is going to say in the context of this alliance tonight, it could have ramifications for the world. NATO is historically strong. It is historically united. And when Ukraine, which is not a NATO nation, came under attack from Russia, the NATO nations largely came in to support Ukraine against Russia. So, yes, there is going to be a significant focus on what the president has to say tonight about NATO. There's going to be a significant focus, too, on what is he going to say about the end of this conflict. We know he wants a way out. We know he's trying to find an off-ramp. The question is, how is he going to do that, and under what terms is he going to do that? Because this morning we heard him talk about a ceasefire proposal from Iran's president. That was denied by Iran. Now we're hearing the Iranian president is going to present a letter to the American people. We've heard another statement from Mojtaba Khamenei, the new supreme leader of Iran, who is vowing to continue supporting terrorist groups who attack the United States and Israel, insisting that they are what he calls the US Zionist enemy. So there is a lot of questions too, and a lot of questions, as you say, about the Strait of Hormuz, because if President Trump walks away from this conflict and that strait is not open, it may well be that that is one of the terms that they are trying to deal with in back-channel negotiations as we speak. But if he walks away from this conflict from the United States perspective, does Iran walk away from the conflict too? Does Israel walk away from the conflict too? If the strait's not open, what does that mean for global energy prices? What does that mean for a country like Australia? I mean, the United States of America, Luke, just to give your listeners an idea, is largely energy independent. So when President Trump says we don't rely on the Strait of Hormuz, largely factual, because the United States has its own oil reserves. It has been fracking gas. It has been energy independent for more than 15 years now. That is not a position that Australia is in. It is reliant on supplies coming in from overseas. It is reliant on gas. It is been pushing the renewable energy agenda for some time now. And it is not energy independent. It does not have the resources that it relies on coming from the Middle East. So when Anthony Albanese, the Australian Prime Minister, talks last night about, hey, look, the economic impacts of this are going to last months. Well, yes, they are, particularly if the Strait of Hormuz is closed. Australia's going to see higher petrol prices for months and months to come. And it won't just be petrol. It'll be farmers' fertilizer. It will be everything that comes out of that region, because that shipping lane is just so incredibly vital. So yes, look, the hours ahead are going to be critical for this conflict, critical for the NATO alliance, and critical for the world.
If he does quit NATO after the midterms, if Trump doesn't have control of Congress, would the Democrats reverse that, or they can't because he's the commander-in-chief?
Well, then they'd have to go down the path of, I mean, you'd be looking at a change of administration, I think. Really. Yeah. If he decides to pull out of NATO, he is the commander-in-chief and would be signing off on that. The bills that would be before Congress that would deal with the NATO treaty itself and how the United States actually pulls out of that, well, that's political parameters that Congress is going to have to go through. But the United States president is making it clear that he does not. He is considering taking the United States out of this alliance. The midterm's obviously in sight, but this is a president who also looks very heavily at financial markets, at prices. He is economically driven, and it may well be. He said this would be a 4 to 6 week conflict. It's now 32 days. So what's that, 4 weeks and a little bit of change? He is still within that parameter, but what we have seen here in the United States, likewise with countries around the world, is prices have skyrocketed. Petrol, their highest they've been on a national average for 3 years. This adds to cost of living pressures here. You've got the midterms coming up in a few months. He tried to buy time for Iran to make a deal, tried to calm the oil markets, tried to calm the stock markets. That did not work. So now if he wants to stick to that 4 to 6 week timeline of this conflict, he needs to find an off-ramp. But the big question is, having gotten into this situation, how does he now get out? And how does he get out and leave the region of the Middle East stronger than what it was before, and making sure that the Strait of Hormuz is open? He is saying that a ceasefire deal can be struck on those terms if the Strait of Hormuz is open. Now, if it's not, I keep going to this issue, but it is because, look, it is so fundamentally critical. It is fundamentally critical to economies around the world, including Australia's, this vital shipping laneway. Yes, there is the talk of NATO. He's been critical of this organisation for years. He has been critical of the NATO nations right throughout this conflict. But go to the heart and the substance of what we are going to see tonight, and there are going to be questions firmly focused on what is he going to say about the United States involvement in this conflict, and what is it going to do about the Strait of Hormuz, if anything? Because yesterday he essentially, as you pointed out, he told the likes of France and the United Kingdom, you want the oil? Just go in and fix it yourself.
Yeah, and we're included in that. What do the American people think? You've got your finger on the pulse well and truly, Jonathan. What do the folks think?
Well, the American people, when you look at poll after poll after poll after poll after poll, yes, they support President Trump going in and trying to remove the Ayatollah and stop Iran having a nuclear weapon and those core issues. But dig a little bit deeper, because this has been fundamental for the MAGA base, that they didn't want to be dragged into forever wars. It, as I mentioned, at a time when the midterms are looming and the cost of living is biting for many Americans. So there is a sense from many Americans you speak to, they don't want America to be dragged into a prolonged war. They still know the pain and the suffering the country felt losing so many service personnel during the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was actually talking with an immigrant who's moved to the United States this morning. His son served in the US Marines, did a tour of duty in Afghanistan, and I was talking to him about this very issue. And he was essentially expressing to me that he would be hugely concerned if his son was still a Marine now. His son is not. He's a doctor in the armed forces based in the Indo-Pacific region. But this is an elderly gentleman who moved to the United States for the American dream, created his family here, and is concerned about the prospect of a war carrying on far longer than what the president had said he would make it last. That's just one case study in a country of 330 million people. But the midterms are looming. It is going to be a factor. I mean, if this conflict still drags on, the closer and closer and closer you get to the midterms, the more likely it is going to be a political problem for Republicans trying to run in congressional races and Senate races to try and secure the seats and try and keep hold of Republican control in Congress. It would become incredibly difficult for them. So the president knows he needs to find an off-ramp. The question is, how is he going to do that, and when is he going to do it?
Yeah, well, we'll keep a very close eye on what's happening there. And Jonathan, we can't thank you enough for you keeping us informed. And you and I hopefully can talk next week, yeah?
Yeah, let's talk again next week, Luke. And who knows, will we still be in this conflict? Will the war in Iran still be going on? Will the United States still be involved? These are questions that will be answered over the course of the coming hours. But watch Sky News. You'll be able to find out all the latest details from down here at the White House. We'll bring it to you live and in full.
Jonathan Kersley, live from Washington.
They brighten my day, got the bluesy rhythm, but it's swinging my way. Oh, I got the Luke on a blues, but they're the kind that chase away the gloom. Tapping my feet, smiling wide, happy blues.
Well, I'm incredibly honoured to be able to speak to a bloke that I haven't spoken to in a long time. The last time I caught up with John Anderson, he was Deputy Prime Minister of Australia. It was 1999, and he and the then Prime Minister John Howard came to the electorate of Calare and came into my studio. And it was just before I left for 2GB in Sydney, which was, I think, November or December 1999. John Anderson was, as I say, the Deputy Prime Minister. As a government minister, he had cabinet responsibility for primary industry, including transport, infrastructure, agricultural water rights. He was a member of Australia's National Security Committee from back then, 1999 into 2005. And just remember then it was when we faced the war on terror and we saw the Bali bombings. Now, John Anderson is passionate about this country and where it's going. He has published views on civic freedoms, global food security, the economy, and I wonder how he feels about Australia's current fuel crisis. There's a lot to talk about, and I'm pleased to welcome to the Bonafide podcast former Deputy Prime Minister and Leader of the Nationals, John Anderson. Welcome. How are you?
Good to be with you, and I'm very well. Bit grayer than when we first met.
John, oh yes, but you've got the Clooney look, the George Clooney type thing going for you. So you're very lucky. Distinguished.
I don't know about that, but anyway, thank you.
John, you're an extremely passionate Australian, and there's a lot that you've got to say, and I think a lot of your opinions we need to listen to today. So thank you for allowing me to talk to you. Before we get into Australia's domestic policies and what we're going to do to try and fix this country, the news today is that we have found out that over the last 2 weeks, Australia has deployed SAS troops to the Middle East. 90 Special Air Service personnel are now going to be based near Dubai in the event of war in the region escalating further. And this is a very, very worrying time for the whole world. We are feeling it here in Australia. Now we have troops over there. I didn't know whether we'd actually get boots on the ground in the Middle East. We have. But, of course, we rely and depend 90% of our fuel from overseas. And the Strait of Hormuz being now cut off has really shown how vulnerable we are here in Australia. First of all, SAS troops, boots on the ground in the Middle East. How do you feel about that? Was that the right decision?
Well, they're not there for a combat role in Iran. They're there in case emergency measures have to be taken to protect Australian interests, as I would understand it. And I think it's probably reflecting a tiny bit better thinking on the part of the government because, to be honest, I don't think we've seen a lot of it. The Iranian situation, and I'm very aware that the great bulk of your listeners will be angry with the Americans, funnily enough, probably more angry with them than the Iranians for starting this. I just want to urge people to keep perspective on this. I know what we have now is really looking worrying. There's no doubt about that. I'm not sure it would have made even worse if America hadn't, with Israel, intervened. And I say that because what's quite apparent is that they have been totally intent upon building a nuclear capacity. That's obvious. They've been getting close. The next thing that's obvious is that unlike every other nuclear power, even though so far the madman in North Korea hasn't used it, but I don't think we've got any doubt now the mullahs would use it in their obsession with wiping out Israel. Now, what we do know is that since the 12-day war last year, the Iranians have been, with extraordinary speed and efficiency, cranking up their production of really, really powerful missiles that we now know can reach as far as Europe. What was the idea? It was to make certain that the next time they got their nuclear program going to get that bomb that they would have used, they would have been able to threaten with those long-range missiles. You wouldn't have been able to get at them. So this is a horrendously disturbing. It is time. There is no doubt about that. And the thing that really despairs me, I know I'm carrying on here, but really makes me despair, is that this country has been such a sluggard. This country that you and I love has been living in such total la-la land that we have not prepared, and people who don't prepare are the ones who fail when things go wrong. I'll give you one simple example. By international agreement, we're meant to have 3 months fuel stock. We're an island trading
90 days.
An island trading nation surrounded by water, utterly dependent upon trade to keep ourselves going, totally dependent on it. We now know that being able to bring in oil is critical. Japan is a trading nation, many more people than Australia, but it's a trading nation surrounded by water. We are boasting that we have 35 days of stock. They have 254 days stock.
We had 20 years ago 8 oil refineries operating in Australia. We used to drill for oil in Bass Strait. Now, I'm told, and in fact, David Littleproud, who was a regular part of this podcast, was explaining it's both sides of the political fence that have allowed this to happen. He says that the production of oil in Australia to create refineries to drill for oil is a really, really expensive exercise. And back in the day, oil was at a worldwide cheap price. And so the government of the day said, well, why are we making very, very expensive oil? Why don't we get it in from somewhere else and store our fuel somewhere else, which seemed like a good idea at the time. Not so good today.
Look, I've not said this. This is the first time I've said it publicly, but I'll say it on your show because there's a bit of revisionism going on there. I notice people say, well, Anderson, you didn't do anything about it. They're forgetting that we were fully self-sufficient until around 25 years ago when the first driftage started to happen. As recently as 10 years ago, we could have kept the country going, roughly 10 years ago. Could have kept it operating with a bit of rationing and what have you, but it wasn't chronic like it is now. And it is chronic. Let me leave you in no doubt. And your listeners ought to understand one of the ugly realities of this is that we're worried about petrol prices. Petrol gets you to work and helps you pick the kids up. Good things, important things. Diesel feeds you. Without diesel and without other fossil fuel-related things like crop protection and fertilizer, you won't eat. You won't eat. We won't be able to grow it and we won't be able to get it to you. And it will not change overnight.
I've said this many times, but, you can come up with speeches saying, well, look, we've got to conserve fuel. If you can work from home, do that. During COVID, we learnt to work from home. We learnt how to use Zoom and other video forms of communication. Well, guess what? Groceries don't get to our shelves via Zoom.
No, well, we don't grow them out here. I'm on a farm. You can probably see in the background or out in the semi-open on a semi-veranda. But just going back to what was happening, I remember having a major paper prepared when I was still Transport Minister because I was worried that the experts were telling us that we were not turning up a lot of oil reserves, crude reserves. Geoscience Australia doing the prep work, the sort of preliminary work, were getting concerned, I think would be the word, about what we had. And so I had a major paper written and it argued basically, it came from the bureaucracy. We only use 1% of the world's oil. We would always have more than enough gas and coal and iron ore to export to attract others to supply us with the raw materials. I didn't think it was a very adequate paper then. I certainly didn't believe everything the bureaucracy told me, but it had some useful stuff in it. I remember, though, quite specifically, and this is relevant in terms of what's happening in Queensland, where I think the only leader I can see in Australia who's actually talking about what we need to do is David Crisafulli. There are massive reserves up around Gladstone of shale oil. And I remember convincing Cabinet, and on the basis that we needed to find more crude to keep our refineries going, to keep our independence up, that we should back that work. Here's the next point, of course. The people who were vehemently opposed to it are the Greens. It's always the Greens. And that's why I suspect little will happen now. This is the most shocking thing to me of all. We have had more wake-up calls than any society has had a right to expect before it all goes to custard. We've ignored them. And now we're saying, let's cut the excise. Let's ease the pain a bit here. No, the Australian people should be told this is serious. This is not fuel in our time. Remember, peace in our time. Unless we take real action, it will be, no, there isn't any fuel, there isn't any fertiliser, we can't do it properly if there's another shock because we're so vulnerable to those shipping channels. And if something goes wrong to the north,
yes,
hypothetically speaking, we don't even have to be involved like we're not involved this time. It could bring us to our knees in days. We do not even have an Australian tanker that the government could commandeer and compensate the owners for. Not one. And send it off to some other part of the world that's not in conflict to bring some oil back if shipping were to freeze because something happens to our north. We all know the government itself tells us these are the most dangerous times since the 1930s. So I'm expressing, I suppose, my deep despair and frustration that we are living in la-la land, that the leadership that we needed now, and there may be others, and there's certainly some in the private sector, I do see the Premier of Queensland saying this is a wake-up call. We've got to get out there and do things. I hear Matt Canavan saying that. I think Angus Taylor, it needs to be remembered, we wouldn't have any refineries if he hadn't intervened. Can I repeat that? In my judgment, if he had not intervened and put packages on the table, I think it kept 3 open and then 1 folded anyway during COVID. We wouldn't have any. So he deserves some credit in this. If we're in the game of being fair, but the problem with the current regime is they seem unable to rise to a serious national issue. And I'll nearly guarantee, and I say this with total despair because I'd love them to do better for all of us, that no substantial addressing of the crisis for tomorrow comes out of this.
I want to stay on your thoughts on domestic policy, but I've got to ask you about Donald Trump. And we were on the edge of our seats yesterday. You and I spoke on the phone, waiting for Donald Trump's announcement on America's continuation in NATO, and we thought Trump was going to pull out. And you can tell me your opinion on that if America does. But diplomatically, isn't it a difficult dance for Australia to play when our largest trading partner is China, but we have a long history and a friendship with the United States, and we really do rely and depend upon the United States for a defensive umbrella, don't we?
Well, I hear people everywhere saying Australia should be more independent. More independent with what? We haven't got a warship that we can send to the Middle East. That's obvious. So if you're going to be independent, you've actually got to take your security, defence properly And seriously, you will make certain that we're secure on the cybersecurity front. You'll make certain we have our supply chain, so we have fertilizer, we have fuel, we have medical supplies. We can keep the country fed and safe if something goes wrong. You'll make certain that you've actually got the capacity to repel inbound missiles and drones if something goes wrong, because if conflict breaks out to the north, there are places in Australia that will be targets. And I don't think the government's level with us on that.
Do you think we need to develop a defence system like Israel and get an Iron Dome or a number of them?
Can I just say this to you? In something you got right in 2009, now if my maths is right, that's coming up to 17 years ago, Luke. 2009, the man who in this country really understood China, put aside all of his other political ups and downs, it was the Prime Minister of the day, Kevin Rudd. He told the nation we needed 12 new state-of-the-art submarines and Tomahawk missiles.
Yeah.
17 years ago.
Yeah.
Do we have either? 17 years on. That's nearly the time between the end of the First World War and the beginning of the Second World War. Why would anybody take Australia seriously when we don't take our own selves seriously? What has happened to this country?
It's a bloody big coastline. It's a bloody big coastline to defend, though, isn't it? Largest in the world.
Well, that's why you've got to work with allies. And I know that's tricky at the moment. But the first rule, Peter Costello often used to say this, and he was absolutely right. In an uncertain world, the first thing you do is you get your own house in order. Now, this is or was about the 12th largest economy in the world with just whatever, not under 30 million people. If this country can't make sure that it has a defence force that's credible, that it has fuel reserves and fertiliser reserves or makes its own, that's an important point. People say, oh, well, you didn't put 90 days of stock aside. No, the international rules that we signed up to in the 1970s said you don't have to until...
The IEA.
The International Energy Association, the IEA, was set up.
Agency.
Set up for thank you, for that, the oil shocks of the 1970s. I'm old enough to remember them. And Australia signed in 1979. There are now 32 members. We're the only one that hasn't done what we were meant to do. If you're an exporter, you don't have to hold the reserves. In other words, you're meeting your own needs and you're an export. To the extent that you don't, you need those reserves. We can't. And I have been saying, no, I hate sounding like I'm clever. I'm not. But I have, as a farmer, been saying now for probably 13, 14 years, the deteriorating outlook and our declining self-sufficiency means we need a proper energy plan. Look, I mean, you've had John Blackburn, a former Navy officer. You've had John Coyne. You've had experts everywhere in this country, to their credit, the NRMA. As best, even the National Farmers Federation, although I'd have to say as a farmer, it's about time our farm leaders started calling for a proper energy plan and just stopped telling us what they're against rather than what they're for and what needs to be done. We have a crisis of leadership in this country. That is my real view.
I could never understand why, where we had an abundance of gas, we would sell it overseas and leave ourselves short and end up buying it back. I mean, if I could give you an analogy, you're a farmer. Let's say you're a dairy farmer, and dairy farmers or whatever company wants to buy your milk. Well, you'd make sure you had enough on your farm to supply your family before you sold it all, wouldn't you?
Well, yes, and of course that could have applied with gas, but basically New South Wales and Victoria have dropped the ball. They've fallen prey to the emotions around gas development. There's enough gas in Victoria in all probability to power the place up for a century, but for ideological reasons they're not allowed to develop it. But you raise an incredibly important issue here. Everyone looks at Queensland and the massive amount of gas that goes out of that state and forgets something. None of the companies would have made the billions of dollars of investment in it if they hadn't had valuable overseas contracts, and no one in Australia was writing them. Now, see, the other side of your coin, I understand what you're saying about dairy farmers, but say, look, we grow wheat. We export a lot of wheat out of this country. We wouldn't grow that wheat if we didn't have those export contracts. It's a big thing for a sovereign country to say we're going to break those contracts. The answer is more supply. The answer is not taking back from the contracts that supplied the gas in the first place. the gas isn't here because we know we've got oodles of it, more than enough for domestic. We know we could export a lot more. We know we could make fertiliser out of it here. The Page Research Centre, I'm the chairman, Jared Holland, has done a superb job. Perhaps you should have him on. We've just released a really important roadmap for Australia to get out of this mess and secure our security, for want of a better term. And the obvious things to do are to turn back to technology we know can be used to turn coal and gas into diesel in particular, to keep the country safe. But you can hear it now, Can I put it to you this way? As a farmer, there's an old saying, oh, yeah, you sit on the front veranda and watch the grass grow. Yeah, that's a nice green dream, if you get my point. It's a green dream. If you don't deal in reality and get out there and do the work, you'll go broke. You'll go belly up. So we've been captured by green dreams, by people who can afford luxury beliefs, by people who do not deal in reality, and by people who think that we can save the planet. We can't. If we try and save the planet in ways that are so counter to our interests, we're actually more likely to damage the environment further, but we'll certainly not be in a position to advance its interests because we'll be upside down in a gully with our legs flailing in the air. I don't want to sound alarmist, but I genuinely don't. I'm not that sort of person. But this is serious.
But we are. We completely belly up with our legs flailing in the air now.
Well, that's my worry. And where is, from the current government, the leadership? Where are the people saying, I'm really sorry to the Greens in the Senate, but actually it's going to be around your necks if we fail, if we can't feed, because you won't let us explore, because you won't let us get on with the vital things and reduce our dependence on unreliable partners in the rest of the world, or partners who might be intending to be reliable but just simply can't deliver the product. And there's a fair bit of that going to happen in the Middle East. Now, a lot of these wells that have been damaged will take a long time to come back on stream. Many may never come back, I'm told. May never come back.
So, John Anderson, tell me this. If you were Australia's ambassador to the United States, and a little birdie tells me you have actually been asked to take up an ambassadorship. Am I correct? You have been asked?
A long time ago. Certainly not now. I'm pretty out of currency these days.
No, but if you were Australia's ambassador in Washington, how would you handle Donald Trump and his foreign policy and his sometimes very flippant attitude to his allies, including us?
I don't have a neat answer to that, and I don't want to sound patronising about people who have had that extraordinarily important role. I think the only thing I would say is that you'd have to speak from a position of authority. Australia is a mid-sized, significant country. You'd have a lot more authority, if you could see that we were really pulling our weight, if we were not a country that is going headlong into deep, deep debt, that is not taking its own security seriously, that does really, I think, unwise and inappropriate things like recognise a non-state Palestine, or try to, that doesn't exist, without telling people it's been offered statehood 3 times before and never accepted it. That obviously has not gone down well in America, and it was an unwise thing to do. It reeks of a country that just wants to, if you like, fall into line with the failed European model of progressivism. So I don't pretend it's going easy at all. I look at some of the ambassadors who have done a great... Look, I better not name them, but I actually think we've had a string of very good ambassadors to America.
Well, I think Joe Hockey did a good job.
I do too. And I just make this point. You speak with a lot more authority if you come from a country that's serious. And it pains me to say it, but just how serious is Australia at the moment? How serious a country are we? An island trading nation that doesn't put down decent stocks so that it can survive a downturn. An island country that has American bases on its soil and doesn't lift a finger to harden them. That's the jargon for make sure they're safe against missiles. Make sure that drones can't, be used to wipe them out. This is... And a country where the leadership won't grapple and tell the Australian people the real nature of what we're confronting.
When you were Minister for Primary Industries, there's something that's very near and dear to me and the importance of water in this country. Now, you could, it wouldn't be much fun, but you could live without oil and petrol, but you cannot live without water. Why is it that we have so much water that falls from the sky in far north Queensland into the tropics during the wet season? And the only way to be able to use it is either if you've got a water tank or through a desalination plant. Why aren't we harvesting that water, building dams, and piping that water to where it's desperately needed? Or am I just being naive and stupid?
No, there's a place we could do considerably more. You can't drought-proof Australia. I've seen some of those proposals. Well, I don't believe you can. I don't actually think you can go that far or that you need to, but we could do a great deal more. But the answer is the same as why don't we do more with fuel security? It's because, look, the Australian character's endearing. We know that. There's a larrikin spirit. There's a laid-backness. We don't like hierarchies. We don't like people who are on themselves. But it casts a very long shadow, complacency. It's been too easy for too long. And that complacency, when you couple it with cynicism and disengagement, which is what we're now seeing in our society, you really are, you've got a recipe for, I think, structural and almost irreversible decline. I can't emphasize enough how serious I think it is, because you've just highlighted another area where, you know, a little bit's been done tentatively in the last few years, but for a long time you weren't even allowed to talk about more dams.
Yeah. Well, they're not environmentally friendly, and they'll find a near extinct green frog somewhere and not allow you to build it.
Well, there are always those stalling techniques. So, you know, I mean, I've been talking to some very senior people involved with trade in Japan recently, and the Japanese are losing faith in us. And one of the reasons, as trading partner, now, the Lowy Institute did some research that established that the Australian people regard Japan as our best friend in Asia. And we ought not to overlook that. And they, by the way, they take their security seriously, 254 days of fuel reserves, and they're building, in the face of the emerging dangers, they now have something like 140 warships. You know, we've got almost none. And as we work out, none that we can send to the Middle East because they can't defend themselves in modern battle. Australia's never been in these waters before. This is just unbelievable stuff. We're becoming a little inward, shriveled up people. And I can't stand that. That's not the Australian people. You know, there was an old saying that Australians are formidable in war. Think of we're coming up to Anzac Day. Think of the way we celebrate the bravery of Australians in the past, their vision and their courage and their willingness to give all for their fellow Australians. We don't even talk about those things anymore. We don't talk about our heroes. We denigrate those who gave us the country that we live in. And this is not an accident, unfortunately. There are a lot of people very dedicated to convincing our young people. You hear it all the time. You know, 2 or 3 young people saying the other day at a conference in Sydney at Aspire, were engaged with a younger person, and he said that one of them said, "For the first time in my life, I feel proud to be Australian." And an older Australian said to him, "Well, why do you feel that way? Why not before now?" And he said, "Oh, well, I've been to school and university where all I've learned is that we're a terrible country. We're a terrible people."
Kelsey, the millennial who produces this podcast, she and I were having a conversation just the other day about the conflict in the Middle East and should we send troops, and if worse came to worse with a conflict with, say, China, would Australians be ready to join up? Or would conscription, would national service work today with today's mental attitude? I just want to quickly tell you something. My dad, God bless him, he'd be 99. He would have turned 99 on the 1st of May, I think 99. He turned 18 in 1945 and did national service. And if it wasn't for the Americans dropping 2 bombs on Japan, he was off to New Guinea. But he said the 2 years of national service were 2 of the best years of his life. Do you reckon today's 18-year-olds would wear conscription? Because
it's a good question.
There's a growing number of Australians, they're a minority, who absolutely abhor and hate Anzac Day. They say it does nothing but glorify war. You mentioned Anzac Day.
Yeah, I had some research done on this a couple of years back and found that a lot of young Australians, a majority, would say they wouldn't fight for the country. But let's not give up on them yet. I want to make a couple of points out of this. What was interesting was that a very clear majority of Australians believed that at least our children should all do cadet corps. Even Green voters, by a slim majority, thought that cadet corps would be a good idea. So there you go. That's pretty radical.
We had cadets when I was at school, but it wasn't compulsory. But a lot of people did it because they felt left out if they didn't. Yeah. We had cadets.
Well, yes, I did. Now, let's build on that, though. History is always your guide. The answer to your question is whether we were well led or not would determine what we would do. It's about leadership, and that's why I despair at the moment. We're not getting the leadership. You know, I mean, I feel like the Prime Minister's waving a piece of paper, fuel in our time. Do you remember Chamberlain, peace in our time? He wasn't levelling about how dangerous things really are and what Britain needed to do. We're not doing the same. To be fair to Chamberlain, actually, they got on with it. When he waved that bit of paper, Britain had less than 100 fighter aeroplanes. 12 months later, they had nearly 700 Spitfires and Hurricanes. 12 months later, they'd built hundreds. The Germans by then, you know, which they used to devastating effect during the Blitz and so forth, had 4,800. But those 700s were so technologically superior and of a level, piloted well, they made the difference. That's a diversion. The point I wanted to make is this is a really important little lesson from history, and it's less than 100 years ago. The young people at the most famous debating society in the world at Oxford in 1933 passed overwhelmingly a motion that says we will not fight and die for king and country. We won't do it. We won't defend the country. What were they doing 6 years later in the face of terrible, terrible danger and the loss of their freedom and the Nazi regime? They were flying their Spitfires and their Hurricanes, risking their lives over London. They were escorting the convoys in over the Atlantic, bringing in food and supplies. They were manning the anti-tank guns in the Middle East against the Nazis. What was the difference? Two things. Reality. When you're brought face to face with reality, you know, they're our sons and daughters. There'll be heroes amongst them. The second thing, defining factor, of course, was leadership. Churchill said, well, we've got a terrible choice. We lose freedom and everything that's valuable about it and become serfs to an evil regime, or we stand up and defend ourselves. So I want to say, I know the surveys show that young Australians overwhelmingly say, no, we don't want to fight. I get that. But I also want to say that I actually have enormous confidence in the best of them. They're our sons and daughters.
Yeah, I know. I think, and we saw this during the Vietnam conflict where there was, once again, national service, there was conscription. A lot of young Australians thinking, well, hang on, this is a political war I don't understand. I mean, the argument was communism was coming down through North Vietnam. It was eventually going to make its way to Australia. Let's cut it off in Vietnam. But it was very, very cloudy. Whereas World Wars I and II were very clear cut. It was the good guys versus the bad guys. And I just don't think Australians would put their army boots on and go and fight a political war that they didn't quite understand.
Look, I understand your point entirely. But if the leadership was there and it was actually more than a political war, it was a war that went to, will we survive as a free and independent people and able to look after our vulnerable and all the rest of it, all of those high and noble things, I think it would be very different. I mean, I take your point entirely about Vietnam, and the problem there again was leadership. I mean, it was basically Lyndon Johnson in America, and Senator Fulbright said of him, it was a very interesting comment. He said, Roosevelt lied in the national interest. He was talking about a German attack on an American ship in the American interest, thus opening the door for Lyndon Johnson to lie against the American interest. It goes to integrity in public life. It would be all about the leadership that the country needs, and we need it right now, taking the Australian people into their confidence, saying this is what we really face. And mentioning FDR, he said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. I would say in Australia today, the thing we have to fear is leadership that is not levelling with us and telling us what we need to do to maximise our chances of staying a free and independent people.
Yeah. Let's talk about, I will have to say this, and you've said some very generous things about Chamberlain, but just remember, he completely underestimated Hitler's thoughts and possibilities. And you had the 1938 Munich Agreement, and Chamberlain was, well, he was wrong. However, I don't want to gloss over any of that. I just want to say that I think the point I was making was that at least
to whatever extent he was involved. Britain used that 12 months to get real. It was very late in the piece, but they did. My question is, will we get real now? And I'm worried we won't. I'm not sure I see the leadership we need.
Let's talk about that. Let's bring it home. To have good government, you need good opposition, and we've had terrible opposition for a long, long time. Now there is a new coalition leadership team. However, from the swamp of despair from Conservative federal politics has risen again Pauline Hanson, and a great ally of the National Party, a former leader of the National Party, a former Deputy Prime Minister, Barnaby Joyce, has lent his political weight to One Nation, and they're polling through the roof. They're polling better than the Liberals and the Nats at the moment. Why is that, do you think?
Look, I accept that people are deeply worried about the country. They're very frustrated. They feel we've lost something. They feel they've lost their country. I understand that. I really do understand that. I would add two enormous points for people to please carefully consider it. The first is the more that rural and regional Australia embrace alternative politics, if you like, looking for a return to Australia, unfortunately, I think the more people like Climate 200 will dig in and we'll get this separation of the country. And I want to say, please recognise that the leaders of the coalition have to somehow manage that. I know some of your listeners will have strong views on that, but I plead with you for the second reason. The second reason is critically important. The lesson out of South Australia is very clear, that it's like the DLP split in the 1950s. If we divide the vote on our side of politics, my side of politics, I won't assume yours, that would be wrong of me. If we divide it, we will simply guarantee that inadequate Labor governments get free passes. There is a real danger that the worst government in Australia, in my view, the Labor government in Victoria, will be returned. It'll be returned because of, well, frankly, the weakness of the Liberal Party there, but also the fracturing of the vote.
But a weak alternative. This is what I think Conservative voters are feeling very disenfranchised about, because the alternative hasn't. We haven't seen strong defining policies, and Pauline Hanson is maybe feeding a hunger that's there. And in 1996, you were in the Parliament. Her maiden speech, 1996, where she said we'd be swamped by Asians and we need to get rid of immigration, and there are good immigrants and bad immigrants, she was obsessed with Asians then. She's obsessed with Muslims now, but they don't assimilate, they don't speak our language, and if I have the right to deny entry into my house for a visitor, I have the right to say who's welcome in my country. Now, Pauline Hanson hasn't really changed her ideology since that maiden speech in 96, and it's giving a large amount of Australians now something, well, maybe someone to blame, someone to hate, but isn't it up to the coalition to be strong and give the Conservative voters of Australia a clear alternative?
Look, I think you're right. I think my essential point is that somehow we've got to get to that very point. Because if we fracture the vote, I'm not going to sit here and condemn many good people around me now, right here as I speak in regional Australia, who are saying, she's saying what needs to be said. That's what they're saying. They're very frustrated. They are contemptuous of leaders who have not addressed the issues that worry them. I get that. I'm not going to insult good Australian citizens who are deeply worried and are sending very clear messages. What I do want to say this, that from the point of view of the things that worry me in regional Australia, I think Matt Canavan's been doing a very good job of isolating them out. I've already said of Angus Taylor, be fair in your judgments. We would not have a single refinery left in Australia if he hadn't intervened. In fact, I think we'd have had more if they'd accepted what he put on the table. It's taxpayers' money. Somebody said the other day it's not an original, but we got to the point in this country where we've got an industrial NDIS as well as a social NDIS. All our major industries are being propped up with dollars. Where are those dollars coming from? Our kids. Why are we able to do it? Because a responsible government between 1996 and 2007, I'll say this up front, put the country in a financial position where we could afford to do all sorts of things. The trouble is that much of it's been irresponsible. We're trying to save the very industries that we're killing with our policies. So we put absolutely hopeless regulatory and green and environmental and emissions policies on our industries, saying that we've got to get the big dirty polluters, and then when they're going to go bankrupt, we put poor bulk taxpayers' money, which happens because it's borrowed, to be our children's money, into saving those industries. This is contemptible. Now, when it comes to, plainly, I believe this country is very badly led at the moment by the current government. I don't think it is a government for dangerous times at all, not within a bull's roar of it. And so my plea to people who are frustrated is to say, we have got to get together well enough to put together a model that defeats the current government, doesn't deliver it further power, which it doesn't deserve, and which is not in the national interest, because we're divided. So we've got to find unity. That's my message.
Is nuclear energy a real alternative? Peter Dutton was hell-bent on it, and I was really disappointed at the election that he lost convincingly that didn't come up, because I was really looking forward to the debate about nuclear energy, and we didn't get it. He dropped it. What do you think?
You're right. Well, I think it's a tragedy it was dropped. Handled the right way, you push these people into a circumstance where they are forced to say, right, we either go nuclear or we go back to coal, or we dramatically reduce our living standards. Dramatically, which is happening, by the way. It is happening. Our living standards are being dramatically reduced, faster than any other country in the OECD. And unfortunately, we lack the leaders who can connect the dots in people's minds. And I'm optimistic that will change. I have to be, but we have to make those points. And really, if people don't want to go back to coal, but we want to maintain our living standards and we want to have the next economy, which will be digital and AI, frightening as AI might be for many of us, we have to have more power, not less. We have to have reliable power, and it has to be affordable power. Otherwise, we will not be able to turn around the structural decline in our performance. And can I say to your listeners, next time you go and buy groceries, recognise that between 20 and 30% of the costs embedded in everything you buy to feed yourself with is the cost of energy. The more energy goes up, the less affordable your food, let alone the other things you buy, will be.
Yeah. Talking to another great friend of this program, Scotty Phillips, and I think he raises a very good point, though. Wouldn't it be great to be completely self-sufficient again and to invite exploration, oil drilling and make our own oil, refine it here and be self-sufficient like other countries? But it's an exceedingly expensive exercise, building a refinery, maintaining it, manning it, our wages. We have a standard of living. We expect certain wages. It's a bit like our car industry. We just couldn't compete. And Holden and Ford went, so too did Toyota and Mitsubishi and a few others. But just getting back to oil, it is a very expensive thing. And Scotty's concerned that if we were completely self-sufficient, the cost of that oil and the cost of the fuel we expect to put in our cars and the diesel in our trucks would be so expensive, we'd be like Cuba. And we'd be a third-rate country because that petrol that we manufacture would be just priced beyond anyone's reach. What did you make of that?
Well, that cost, I made the point earlier. I don't claim credit for it, but our heavy industries everywhere are on a national industrial NDIS, National Disability Insurance Scheme. The taxpayers are propping them up because they're not viable. Why are they not viable? Because of our restrictive regulations, because of hopeless industrial relations and productivity performance, because of high interest rates, because of high inflation, but above all because of high interest costs. We had amongst the world's lowest electricity costs. When you and I last spoke, as you said, we had amongst the cheapest energy in the world and the cheapest transport, by the way, in the world, which is really important. In real terms, it was cheaper than it was ever been. Sorry, not in the world, because Americans have things like massive internal waterways. And it's very cheap to barge wheat down the Mississippi or whatever. We don't have that equivalent. But they were the lowest in real terms they'd ever been in Australia. I had that researched at the time. We were starting to produce world-class motor cars. People forget that. It failed almost as soon as they launched them. But The Falcons and Holtons that were launched at this particular interest of mine in around 2007 and 8 were genuinely world-class cars. Genuinely. Yeah. They weren't.
Oh, yeah.
They really actually were. Unfortunately, people were moving away into SUVs and what have you, so the scales of economy started to work against the local industry. But it just tells a point that with the right sort of government policies, we need never have gotten to this mess. Now, it's not going to be cheap to get out of it. That's why I'm actually personally not in favour of the excise cuts. Very nice for you and me to have a little bit of relief at the Bowser. But I actually think the country should be looking for massive savings because I think we're going to have to do, for want of a better word, some serious PPPs, public-private partnerships. The government will have to be involved. We are going to have to, I think Andrew Hastie's onto this, have to. And Angus Taylor's demonstrated already that he understands this because he intervened to save the few remaining refineries we had. We're going to have to do some of that stuff because it might be expensive fuel, but we're starting to see what it's going to be like with no fuel.
Good point. Let me ask you about Pauline Hanson, who is obsessed also with immigration, and she's getting a lot of traction out there. Australia's projected net gain of 306,000 people year ending June, I think, last year, is down from 429,000, which was the previous year. Do you think we need to address immigration? Is immigration the problem? Are immigrants taking our jobs? Are they looking to live in houses where Australians can't afford or buy a house? We have a housing shortage, a rental crisis. Is immigration the problem?
Look, the numbers are too high and the standards are too low. Now, we need to have an honest, this is another area where we need a very honest conversation. We have to start with the fact. Yes, well, we do need to have it. We must start, as Peter Costello said. He foresaw all of this, not the immigration crisis, but he saw what was coming at us. We have a demographic crisis. We're not having children. We're aging. We're running out of taxpayers to do the work to keep the economy going. It is extraordinary that we don't have enough people looking for jobs at the moment in Australia. We actually have a shortage. Now, we've got to start with the reality that part of the reason is that young Aussies are not having children. And
I've spoken to, I just remember I'm the father of, side 2, raised 4. Oldest is 34. Kelsey's in her late 20s. Holly is 30. And children are expensive. And also, I don't know where I'm going to live. I don't know if I can pay my mortgage. Two of my kids have said I can't even possibly get a deposit for a house in Sydney. I'm blocked out. Children frighten the hell out of me. And you know, they'd rather have overseas trips, widescreen TVs and nice cars.
Yeah, well, they'd rather have freedom too, of course, in the end. And you won't have freedom if you don't have a country that's coherent. No, that's not meant to be smart. It's just that the choices here are really quite difficult. So the young people do blame, we know this from the research, they think high immigration is part of the problem. They are partially right, I'm sure. And I get that there are multitudes of reasons why they don't want to have children. Erica Commissar said a really interesting thing at the Aspire conference in Sydney. She made the point as an expert with 30 years of experience working with parents in particular and with children. A great deal of your attitude towards having children is related to your own childhood experiences. If you had really happy childhood days, you're more likely to want to replicate it. And we know a lot of kids now are growing up deeply anxious. Their childhood wasn't much fun. That's something we need to have a talk about. It's a pretty sensitive area. I'd be the first to say it. But it's important. See, these issues are so much more complex, aren't they, than people say. I agree. I mean, I think it's well framed to say the numbers are too high, the standards are too low, and we're getting terrible division. We are allowing the importation of ancient hatreds that have no place in Australia.
Yeah.
No place. Yeah. And they are dividing
why do we allow people into the country that hate us?
Because we don't believe in our own culture anymore.
We've
created a vacuum.
Well, that's a good question, Australian culture.
Well, it's Easter, so I'll make this point. Our culture, and this, you just can't avoid it anymore. People say, I don't want to talk about religion. That is not an adequate excuse anymore. Our culture is essentially derived, all the great thinkers, all the people who framed the American Constitution, the Australian Constitution that shaped modern Britain, were deeply influenced by the Christian concept that every individual has value. They're all flawed, but they all have value. So you've got to give them say, and you mean a peaceful way when they get proud to remove them from government. That is a vastly different culture that has its origins in what we believed as a culture. We no longer believe that. We don't pay it any attention. We've created a vacuum, and now into that vacuum has flown the progressive view that actually the world's problems are essentially based around racism, and particularly white racism and white supremacism. And in Australia, of course, the story fed to our children, and we know it's fed to our children. That's not pussyfoot around this, is that we're a highly suspect culture because we're colonisers.
Yes.
I'm not saying we shouldn't deal with our past honestly and with integrity, but nobody's served if all we do is get into self-flagellation. I mean, I haven't dispossessed anybody. Neither have you, neither have our children, neither of all of the immigrants have come here. They've come here seeing an opportunity to be the best person they can, to get ahead. And this is our forefathers, whatever their failings, have given us a constitution and a set of governmental and legal arrangements based in that idea. Menzies got it. Menzies said, that the democracy is based on the idea that there's a spark of the divine in each one of us. No matter our failings, we all have value. That's not the modern idea. If you dare to disagree with me, I won't judge you on the basis of your character. You dare to disagree with me, you're a bad person. And it's blowing us apart. It's dividing us every which way. And this is creating a vacuum. We find ourselves defenseless. We talk vaguely about Aussie values. Well, what are Aussie values? Define them for me.
You tell me. What do you think Aussie values are? What is Aussie culture?
The truest Australian expression of what is actually the Judeo-Christian concept is Jack's as good as his mate. Don't be on yourself. Mateship. It's actually, believe it or not, at its best, a surprisingly Christian concept. I will look after my mate. I won't just look after me. My mate matters. And my mate might vote Labor and I might vote Coalition, but he's still my mate. And my mate might have a different, deeply based in the idea of the value of my fellow Australians.
But it's not just Christians that believe that. I'm sure there are other religions that also believe do to your fellow man as you'd have him do to you. And that comes out of the mouth of Christ. But there are religions that believe that philosophy as well. And are you suggesting...
Well, find it in that. Here's a challenge for you. Find it in their scriptures. Find it in their scriptures. Go and have a look at Hinduism, for example, with 300 million people who are untouchables and not fully recognised as human beings, even to this day in the Hindu world. They don't preach the equality of all.
Are you suggesting we should only allow people from a Christian background to immigrate to Australia?
No, I'm not. No.
Sorry, explain what you mean. No. Explain what you mean.
I'm saying if you can't accept the democratic core, which depends on you respecting your fellow Australians and dealing with them at the point of a pencil if you don't like them, not the point of a gun, this is not the country for you. Now, we have in our country, we've seen it, people who think the way to resolve disputes is at the point of a gun because some human beings, by virtue of their race, are not worthy of life. That is directly counter to our culture. Our culture derived the idea of, if you like, the point of the pencil and so forth through centuries, often bloody, it has to be said, but centuries of broadly understanding the idea of freedoms of conscience, of belief, of speech, of assembly, of the right to private property, including your intellectual capacity and your ability to trade them. We've washed all of that out of the system. And so we've become a vacuum. That's my point. And nature abhors a vacuum. Look what's flowing into the vacuum. And by the way, the people who talk about the value of multiculturalism need to realise that if they won't defend our core culture, then the Pauline Hansons of this world will rightly, in my view, move to point out that in denigrating our own culture, we are in fact reducing ourselves to a meaningless culture where we treat the place as a motel, to quote other people, not as a home, not as a country.
You just said, and I agree with you, if you think the only way to get your point across and if people don't agree with you is at the end of a gun, surely we believe in freedom of religion here in Australia. Surely the one thing we must insist on is you obey our laws.
Well, when politics strays into politics, remember, here's one of the fundamental differences. The only religion which allows for, if you like, secularism is in fact Christianity. It's a Christian concept. Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's and unto God that which is God's. We believe in the separation of church and state. I'm a Christian. I believe in the separation of church and state. I think it's the right and proper thing to do. Governments deal with the secular. It doesn't mean that Christians shouldn't be involved in politics. I mean, many of our greatest leaders have been people of profound faith, including, by the way, Jewish people like Sir John Monash. They believed in something higher than themselves, and so forth. These things, I think, are very important indeed. This is one of the great differences with Islam. Most Muslims actually tend towards the view that religion and government should not be separated. Now, if you can't accept, this would be one of my tests for people who want to come here, that the secular government is secular, not religious, it really isn't the culture for you. Now, here's a question for the supporters of multiculturalism. Will you reject that basic idea altogether, or will you accept that we will not have an Australia that's recognisable if we merge the two again? Now, people will say, oh, Anderson, you want to bring religion back into politics. Well, I certainly want to bring a clear-sighted acceptance of the Christian concept of the value of every Australian. But I don't want church and state to be unified again. Never. That will destroy both. Here's the irony. It destroys both.
Yeah. I will never, ever, to the day I die, get the image of that amazing man, Ahmed Al-Ahmed, that 43-year-old fruit shop owner that's been now labelled as the Bondi hero that disarmed that man and showed enormous bravery and will probably be Australian of the Year next year. He was a Muslim. And I'd like to think there are plenty of Muslims that feel that Australian spirit and I'd like to think there are plenty of Christians or Hindus or Buddhists that would feel that they had to do something that terrible day, the 14th of December.
I'm sure that's right. I'm sure that's right. And I don't dispute that for a moment. I think what's important is to understand the, if you like, the radical political Islam that is undoubtedly there and real, and to recognise that it is political more than it is, or at least as much as it is, religious. So a Christian will say the Christian kingdom is not actually of this world, but a brotherhood, Islamic brotherhood, as you know, that's been around for a century or so, a bit more than a century. It's been behind ISIS. It's been behind many of the horrors we've seen in radical Islam. That's a different and very dangerous movement, and we ought to recognise that many countries in the Middle East, which are Muslim, are very worried about these extremists. I mean, you've seen a state in the Middle East. Yeah. Well, that's one word you can use.
Well,
another word you can use is political Islam. Political Islam, which is a political movement,
and not able to separate the state from the church. Let me ask you this, because I've taken up too much of your time, but I tell you what, I could talk to you again and I could talk to you longer. Are we going to be okay?
Not without leadership, no.
If John Anderson today could go back in time and talk to 16-year-old John Anderson, what advice would you give him?
Oh, goodness. I think probably I would say to myself, grasp the opportunities that are going to come your way with greater fervour. I think, I probably at times self-doubted. That will surprise people, I suppose. Perhaps those who know me well would have a different view. I don't know. Sometimes you're not your own best judge. I think I probably would have.
Did I catch you out after all these years of being scrutinised and interviewed by the media? Have I, after all this time, am I the one that caught you out? Did you enjoy the question though? It's made you think, hasn't it?
Well, it has, because I do. I'm that by nature. I often ask myself, what more could I have done? I believe in many ways I was part of a government that did a lot of what could be done. And when I left, I stepped down in 2005 because I wanted to return to private life. And, I didn't find politics a lot of fun, I've got to say. It's exhausting and you're away from your family. Yeah. So, you cop I didn't have trouble coping with fair criticism, believe it or not. It'd make me worry, but it didn't sort of upset me. It was the unfair criticism and the attacks on family and so forth that I sort of found pretty off-putting. But the country was in very good shape in 2005. It really was. You know, we had no net debt. We had money in the bank. Productivity was up. We were largely fuel self-sufficient. We had a defence force that was relevant for the times. Remember what we did in East Timor? We were able to, intervene militarily there with no help from anybody else. United Nations approval.
Yes.
But we did the work. Could we do one of those again?
John Duncan Anderson, thank you so much for your time. Have you enjoyed it?
Yeah, no, well, it's good. Well, you've been very indulgent. You've indulged me. And you've been very kind to me. And I put down some thoughts as boldly and as bravely as I can. Let me just say, please, your listeners understand how deeply I love this country and how much I feel my family owes it, really, 6 generations of them. And when I say I don't think we have a secure future without stronger leadership, that's not said because I want the place to fall apart. It's because I want that leadership that people are looking for, but we've got to look for it in the right places.
John Anderson.
You and me may got place to be. You'll be a little late. Clock can't decide our fate. Not today, not tonight. We will keep it steady and straight.
Time for another Truckee Tuesday as we motor on down the highway with Rocket Rod Hannafy in his Kenwood. And Rod, welcome to another Truckee Tuesday. First question, as always, where are you?
I'm at the BP truck stop at Charlton, which is just out of Toowoomba. I went and loaded on Thursday, and we had a plan. And the plan was that I would load Thursday, go home to Dubbo, and leave there Sunday and go to Central Queensland to a mine. But whilst I was loading, I got a phone call from our Sydney depot that said, they've just rang, and if you're not there Saturday, they'll run out of product and, all hell will break loose, the world will end and stuff like that. So you have to go. So I unloaded at the mine on Friday afternoon early. They were happy with that. And I got back here virtually early Saturday morning. And unfortunately, Luke, that means I'm sitting here until Tuesday, which doesn't excite me a great deal.
Rod, second question, obvious question. What's the availability of diesel out there on our roads?
Look, again, for us in trucks, it's a little bit different. If you've got a diesel car and you're trying to get it from a servo, I hear it's pretty grim in places. Some places haven't had any, some have only had a little bit. But look, for us in the trucks where we are, commercial operators, and at most of the places we fuel at are, reasonably big sites with big capacity. I've got to say, it's pretty quiet over Easter. It was very quiet on Easter Friday on the roads. But and some blokes are certainly considering what their long-term view is, whether they park up, what they do and how they're going to survive. There's certainly been a couple of things done from the government of late. But currently for most trucks, unless you're in a bad spot, there's still fuel available. And, of course, that's what we've been told. Let's hope that continues.
I want to talk to you about Western Australia because I find this really, really interesting. WA seems to have had their act together a lot earlier and a lot better than the other states and territories. What are they doing different with fuel policy in WA?
Look, again, in some ways they do things really well and in some things they don't. They're certainly restricted. So the rail's been down across the Nullarbor. That's meant that a lot of their supplies have been affected. There's been a lot more trucks on the road. And a little while ago, I'm sure you're aware, Luke, at one stage there was major flooding up the west coast. And trucks were virtually having to go from Perth across to South Australia, up into the Territory and across the top. I think it was 3,500 kilometres extra to virtually deliver from Perth to Port Hedland and that northwest region. So they did some things, they arranged some things. It took a little while to do. They have made an allowance for extra weight, particularly on fuel tankers, to deliver that fuel to those sites, because it's not just us using the fuel on the road delivering stuff. It's mines and that use the fuel and other things as well, and they rely on it. So, look, they've done a few things to, I suppose, help. But the long-term solution that we need, Luke, is to get rid of this bloody war and get it sorted and get back to where we were, to do something about our refining capacity in Australia and something about our storage. And a man was telling me a story last night, and he was scaring me with figures of the amount of money that we are paying to store our fuel in America. And I'd certainly like to find out whether that's true, because it is. Some people need to lose some, little round things that they shouldn't really have anyway. So if that's the case, that we're paying phenomenal money to store it in America, and of course it's not very handy to us there, then, Jesus, whoever did that needs screwing, mate.
Well, I've had a very, very interesting chat with former Deputy Prime Minister and leader of the Nationals, John Anderson. I spoke to him from his farm. Mm-hmm. And he was the minister in charge of all of this some time ago, and he warned about this many, many years ago. And yes, we may be paying a little more for our fuel if we drill for it here in Australia and store it here and refine it here. But look at the mess we're in now. And there's something else. It's a commonly asked question, and I want to try and attempt to answer it. People are saying, well, why can't the Allies, why can't the United States, or any of, and particularly those countries that are particularly vulnerable now, because the United States is nowhere near as vulnerable as the rest of NATO and the European states, because they drill, refine, and do a lot of their own work there. So the incentive isn't there. There's more of an incentive to keep it closed for Trump, because then people may well be forced to buy from America, and that's in America's interests. However, let me move on. Why don't they just go in, bomb the place, and have escort military or naval vessels escort those oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz? And there's a lot more to it. Number one is geography. That strait where they have to go past Iraq through next and border Iran is very, very narrow. Mm-hmm. Only 2 ships can pass. They have to move right over to get around that point, and they're very, very, very close to Iran. Now, right there, geographically, it's very mountainous, it's rough, it's rocky, it's full of caves and hidey holes where the Iranians can launch drones very, very close to any ship that's moving there. Now, any warship that accompanies these tankers can only carry up to 100 interception missiles that cost over $1 million each. A drone where they can launch 10,000 costs about $20,000 each. You with me?
Yes, I can work that figure out.
Now, if a oil tanker is attacked and disabled in that strait, massive fire, massive oil spill, and no other ships can move there anyway.
Yeah.
And this is also no ship, and this decision doesn't come from the United States or Germany or Israel or any other country. It comes from London, where most of these ships are insured through Lloyd's of London. And no ship can get insurance if it's sailing in a war zone. If you are not covered by insurance, the ship doesn't go. So there's that sort of thing to worry about as well.
Yes, insurance has a lot to answer for, and you understand why. It's not like they're insuring your Commodore at home. You're insuring something worth millions and millions of dollars. And, of course, they can't replace them tomorrow either. You can go and buy another car tomorrow. It's pretty hard to go and buy a new fuel tanker anywhere. So those sorts of things have to be considered. And look, again, the thing with news now, you've got Trump on the radio saying that it's all done and it's finished and they're on their knees and, we're going to have this sorted. And, of course, he told us that he was going to have it sorted weeks ago anyway. So, and we don't know what decisions are being made by any of those people. Whatever we hear is through filtered things in media and through people who in government want to make certain things felt or thought or not understood, because we certainly really don't know what's going on. We're certainly at the mercy of all of those people making big decisions. And as you say, the Americans are slightly affected, but nothing to the extent that we are. They're not vulnerable like we are. And whilst their economy will continue, there are a lot of other people's lives And it's a job. It's, if there's no fuel for you to do your work, you haven't got a job. How do you feed your family? Where do you go and buy it?
Exactly.
The cost of the food's gone up because the fuel's gone up. And you can say it's been mismanaged. Nobody knew it was coming. But we live on an island. And that means that we have to be either self-sustainable or that we have things in place that should such conflicts occur. For all we know, there could be World War III next week. There could be another one in two years. Who knows what's going to happen? Because you and I don't get to control that, Luke. And the people that do control it, you wonder about their motives. And I don't really think they, rate Australians or perhaps people who live in many other countries of the world as highly as themselves. They're there to look after themselves. That's what it's all about. And we have to suffer the consequences. And we've let us be put in this position. And I suppose that the next step is like the same with the manufacturing, Luke. You say if we'd have paid a little bit more for our singlets, instead of Bonds making them in China, if we paid a little bit more for our fridges and kept all that manufacturing capacity here, what happens if there is a war, Luke? We couldn't make the top of a tank. We couldn't make a plane. We can't do any of that because all that capacity's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And we are reliant on those people who think that, well, maybe we're of some value to them. And as I said, I mentioned that book called Nuked about the nuclear submarines, and you've only got to look at that debacle and whether we're ever going to have submarines that are ours or they're going to be controlled by somebody else anyway.
Yeah.
So, mate, very big things that affect us. And we're sitting here copping what's going on with all these other people's decisions.
Now, at the time of you and I talking, it's Easter Sunday, and today the government, along with the ACCC, are asking Australians to dob in servos that haven't passed on the fuel excise break. And people are saying, well, is it un-Australian to dob people in? Well, no. If someone's doing the wrong thing and it's affecting you, people have to follow the law. And it's also illegal to advertise a price when your price is nowhere near that. However, this is part of the most misunderstood law in New South Wales and Australia. Price gouging isn't illegal. We don't cap the price of anything here in Australia. We live in a democratic capitalist society. Now, coming up July 1, there'll be new laws passed come into effect in New South Wales where the big supermarkets, and when I say big, Rod, that is a retailer that turns over 30 billion or more, so we're talking about Coles and Woolies and probably Aldi.
Yep.
They will be accountable by law if they're seen to be exaggerating their prices. But how do you prove that? It's a very ambiguous law. But at this point, there's no law against price gouging. Let me give you another example. Should you cap the price of a house that's for sale? Well, no, I own a house, and when I sell it, I want the best price I can get. Ride sharing, Ubers, etc. They have price surging, where they can charge what they want during surge periods. There's no capping. There's no such thing as price gouging. It's a furphy. So
it's supply and demand, isn't it, Luke?
It's all about supply and demand. Exactly.
For it.
If demand outstrips supply, the price goes up.
Yep.
So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that one in. But it is interesting to see that the Western Australian government seems to be a little bit ahead of the game here because they activated an emergency power to ensure fuel supply. And it comes under their Fuel, Energy and Power Resources Act. So they seem to be a bit of ahead of the game. That's why I brought it up.
And because of where they are, because they are isolated, they're aware of this. It's happened before, and they know how to deal with it quickly. Whereas, how long is it since we as a country have been put in this situation?
Exactly. I just thought I'd throw that in. It's something to think about. The other thing, and I want to know if this is just fear-mongering or whether it's true, we only have now one urea processing plant in Australia. And there's a concern that urea could well be in short supply. Is that going to end up resulting in an AdBlue shortage? Because AdBlue is just as important as diesel for our trucking industry. Can you tell me what your thoughts on all of this are?
And just as a complete problem that's coming, Luke, that probably hasn't been addressed by many, if any. Currently, most of our trucks are Euro 5. Right, and that means that the level of their exhaust is rated. They've got to meet certain criteria, and to comply with that, there were two options. There was EGR, exhaust gas recirculation, that uses more fuel, created some problems with engines, and then there's SCR, which is selective catalytic reduction, and that means that as you drive along, you have a separate AdBlue tank. That AdBlue goes into your exhaust stream and cleans it and gets rid of the nitrous oxides through burning them off and being very hot. Euro 5 trucks use a bit of AdBlue. Euro 6, which is mandated to come in very soon, uses a damn sight more AdBlue. So mine was an early Euro 6. My truck uses approximately 120 litres of AdBlue to 1,500 litres of diesel. This simple figures. I'm not going to tell you whether it's 1 out or 2 out or whatever it is. But most Euro 5 trucks use about 1 tank of AdBlue to 3 or 4 tanks of diesel. Now, again, we are following European and American trends. We want cleaner engines. Now, our output in Australia, and yes, trucks are a part of that, but so are trains and so are generators that use diesel fuel and so are cars. They put out carbon dioxide and yet realistically, Luke, we live in a very large country with a small population by world standards, and what we contribute is less than 1%. Now, we're going and we're spending a lot of money saying you've got to have Euro 6. The engine manufacturers are spending a lot of money to comply and make our exhaust clean. And my understanding is that some of the places in America that are polluted so bad, the exhaust coming out of the trucks is cleaner than the air going in them. Now, when you've got a big population and smog is a real issue, yes, that's probably something you pursue. But here, we're pursuing it to keep up, to be green, to do the right thing. And yet, when all these Euro 6 trucks start coming online, Luke, that AdBlue is going to go through the roof. And what happens then when we haven't anticipated it, when the government hasn't said, oh, well, we're going to mandate this, but is there any other ramifications? Is there anything that we sort of haven't looked at? And AdBlue is going to be one of those things.
So something else to worry about. Is there a possibility that the laws surrounding the AdBlue and the fact that it must be added to trucks for pollution, basically pollution reasons and catalytic reasons, can you see if there was a shortage, would they relax those laws and say don't worry about the AdBlue for a while?
My understanding is that has happened in some places in the States. California, of all places, has the highest level of restrictions on trucks that are old and that. Virtually, if you've got an old truck, you can't drive it in California, depending on where you go and what you do. My understanding is that some of those restrictions have been considered to be removed over there whilst this is happening. Whether it could happen here, government decision. Again, I don't think we're all going to die if tomorrow we turned it off. I think that the pollution would increase slightly. I don't think we're all going to die, though, Luke. So, whether that comes to that point. But again, here we are looking at something where manufacturing capacity, the needs of a particular product, we've let all that walk away and done nothing about it. And yes, people say, well, I want this cheaper and I want that cheaper. But, geez, where do we go for the future, Luke? It is really a worry.
It is indeed. Rod, following the passing of the Fairer Fuel Bill, which was designed to fast-track emergency applications in road transport, an application's been made for an emergency order with the Fair Work Commission to assist drivers and transport operators with these crippling fuel costs. Now, the TWU, the National Road Freighters Association, and the Australian Road Transport Industrial Organisation have written to the Workplace Relations Minister, who's Amanda Rishworth, and they're stringently urging her to expedite the process. What's going on here?
Mate, there are companies that charge a fuel levy, and some of those companies charge it to their customers but do not then pass it on to the people doing the work. I had a gentleman ring me. He's been with a number of companies over the years. He went to his company and said, You're aware that the fuel cost has gone up. Yes. You're aware that we run on thin margins and virtually I'm going broke continuing to do this work for you. I need you to do something about a fuel levy. No. Flat answer, no. He said he'd give him a little bit on the side and wouldn't tell all the other blokes that work there, but he knows that they charge a fuel levy. His customers have told him, oh, yeah, your company that sends us the bills, they charge a fuel levy. So that's deliberate and intentional theft. And I said to this bloke, you've been there a while, haven't you? He said, yeah. I said, well, obviously they give a bit of a bugger about you, and I don't know where they think they're going to get some other, fool is not the right word, but where they're going to get somebody else who's going to go out and buy a truck and come and work for you and go broke every single time he turns that truck on. So the issue is, yes, again, talking to another bloke last night, they've started a fuel levy, they've put it up. Not one single customer has complained because all they are asking is for the recovery of the cost of the fuel, and they recognise that if that transport company doesn't do that work for them, then that stuff doesn't get moved. End of story. And if the industry gets to that point where people start saying, I am better off sitting at home going broke than starting that truck up and losing $1 every kilometre I travel out of my own money because they will not pay you for the amount of fuel that you'll use and the current cost of it. And, mate, there's real concerns that we're going to lose a lot of people out of the industry, and we know we're struggling for drivers now. I'm sure you've seen they've talked about, we're going to have a taste of the outback in New South Wales. We're going to bring 50-metre road trains up the Hume, and my God, that scares me. You know, how many people where are they going to hook these things up, Luke? You're going to have a triple road train coming out of Melbourne to go to Sydney, and what's it going to do when it gets to Sydney? There's no room at Pheasant's Nest to go unhooking triples. You can't get in there now. You know, it's one thing to say it and get on the radio and say, we're going to do this. And yes, if you used less trucks, you would use less fuel. But you've got to have the capacity to do that. But we have a system called PBS, Luke. Have you ever heard of PBS?
Go on.
Performance-based standards. So in the old days, you had a semi-trailer, and then probably 25, 30 years ago, we went to B-doubles. And they are more efficient because you have one truck pulling 1.5 trailers. And the deal was going to be when we started B-doubles that they would only run from depot to depot. You'd put a load on in Melbourne, you drive to Sydney, and it would go to a big depot and they'd redistribute it. Now, that was the theory. That was the fairy tale. Of course, what's happened ever since then is that we've had to split trailers because places aren't designed for B-doubles, and you've got to drop one and get it in here to load, and you've got to drop it to go and unload, and all that sort of stuff. And the driver does all of that. Very rarely do you get paid for that additional time.
Right.
But we're more efficient. So then, of course, they said, well, let's go another step. If there's a task where you can use a bigger truck and the road network is suitable for that bigger truck, and you've only got to look at, the road trains that run in Western Australia and in the Northern Territory, they run on a network that's suitable, they are very efficient, and Australia operates really at world's best practice. We are virtually at the top of, the efficiency of the road transport network. But then they brought in PBS, and you'll see bigger trucks running in places that they never used to. But they are very highly restricted. They cost a lot of money to get those permits and all of those things. And they're very effective in what they do. But they can't deliver into your Coles or Woolies, Luke. They can't go and pick something up and deliver your clothes or your fuel. And look, even in the early days when we had 19-metre and 26-metre fuel tankers, you'd go to a servo and you think, Jesus, who designed this? They obviously never thought we were going to deliver fuel here. Like, it's all right for the cars to drive in and out. But there are some of them, Luke, where you actually have to close down the driveway to get the tanker in to deliver the fuel so the cars can buy it. So, again, all of these people that come up with these ideas, it's something I've said for so many years. We as the drivers and the owner drivers and the people that run the trucks don't get to have a say in the early days. Someone comes up with this brilliant idea, and then the industry says, shit, how the hell are we going to do that? And look, we find a way, Luke. We're generally very, very effective in solving other people's problems. But this is a problem that's affecting us. And if those transport companies disappear, A lot of those blokes will never come back. And if it gets rid of the few ragtag blokes at the bottom that don't look after their gear and shouldn't be on the road in the first place, okay, maybe that brings the level of the industry up. That's what we want. But if it starts hurting families who, as I said to you once before, mate, there was a bloke's been in the industry 24 years, his family are involved, he employs people, he's done it to the best of his ability, and he's standing there saying, should I virtually shut the door and walk away? And who's going to replace him, Luke?
Very interesting. One last thing, Rod, and I'll let you get back onto the road. I read that a joint operation between the ABF and the NHVR, that's the Australian Border Force and the
National Heavy Vehicle Regulator.
National Heavy Vehicle Regulator. They're going to put on extra officers to put heavy vehicle operators who are using unlawful migrant workers on notice. Your thoughts?
Mate, I have seen they already have had results. They have found illegal immigrants. They have found people who are employed on student visas. And we've asked this for a long time. And again, I have no offence to someone coming to this country because it's a bloody good place to live, as long as when they come here, they're compliant. If they come here and they manage to cheat the laws or dodgy things or undercut others, then not only are they being cheated, but the rest of the community pays for that in so many ways they don't really recognise at times, Luke. And we've asked, anybody that comes here, they should be properly trained and tested, not just given a licence because they said they drive a big truck. And some of the employers have been abusing them, mate. And, of course, they come here and they're told, if you don't do this and drive that truck for the next 3 weeks and I'm going to pay you 10 cents a kilometre, then you can go home and your family will all starve and die. And people are put in that position. They shouldn't be. And it's been a long time coming. Part of that is linked to the sham contracting, and we spoke to Glenn Stirl and others have raised over the years, because that's how they get away with it. They say, you come here and do this, I'll give you a job, but you're not allowed to tell anybody. And it's a long time. It's been a long time coming, Luke, and I don't want to pick on people. I don't care whether it's Alaska, Antarctica, or even bloody New Zealand. If they come here, they've got to comply. They shouldn't be undercutting others and taking away their work. And they're getting cheated as well. So it's about time they did something to help those people, put them on a fair thing and make it even for the rest of us that are out there trying to do the right thing, Luke.
Rod, what's your thought for the week? What do you want us to all think about?
Mate, I did see somebody commented on one of our posts that I was whining about the farmers. Nobody's perfect. People have gone out and bought jerry cans of fuel and taken it home. You know, other people have bought fuel because they can get it and they think they need it. If people at the moment think about what they're doing and we can all work together, let's hope there's a way through this. But they've got to recognise that the cost of fuel's gone up. Everything else is too. And like you say, Luke, with that legislation that comes in, I hope that we don't find people who then say, oh, well, it's gone up this much and I'm going to add a bit on just for me and, you know, because I'm worried about going broke in the future. If everybody does that, then we're all in a world of hurt, Luke, and I don't think that's going to help us.
Rod, this Truckee Tuesday will drop right at the end of the Easter break. Your advice for those people negotiating trucks on their way home?
If people respect the size and weight of trucks, it's not about might is right. Now, some truckies do the wrong thing and they think they're big and they can push you. And I'm sorry and I apologise for those blokes because I can't drive them all. But if you respect the size and weight of trucks, you have a little bit of empathy for the bloke that's not at home at Easter and he's out there delivering your fuel and your food, and you give him a little bit of room on the road and a little bit of understanding, you're going to be safer, and so are we. Now, look, I went to Central Queensland the other day, bloke in a four-wheel drive ute, pulled out to overtake me, not enough road space, no one turned up, thank goodness. The dickhead in the car who pulled out to overtake me with another car coming the other way, and he went in with less than 100 metres space between him and another car, so 200 kilometres now closing speed, and yet he's on a long, flat, straight bit of road. It was 4 kilometres long. He could have waited a minute or he could have gone earlier. And, mate, that bloke and his wife and the people in the car coming the other way both could have died because he couldn't wait to save his own life. So for goodness sake, people, get home safe, plan to do it. Don't let somebody else destroy it for you.
Rod Hannafy, always good to talk to you, mate. You have a very, very safe trip, and you and I will talk again very, very soon.
Safe travelling to all, mate.
Thank you so much for listening. As Don Lane used to say at the end of every Don Lane show, I love your faces.
What?
He used to do that at the end of the show.
Okay.
And thank you for the feedback. Keep it coming.
Do you have a thought of the day, Luke?
It's not a thought of the day. I just thought I'd fill you in on something.
Yeah.
You know how I wake up early?
Yes.
Well, I thought I'd do your mum a favour.
What?
I will get into trouble when she finds out because she hates me interfering in her kitchen.
Yeah.
Hates it.
Well, she wouldn't mind if you did some dishes, but yeah.
I arranged all of her seasonings and her herbs and spices.
Where'd you find the time for that?
I was right next to the parsley, sage and rosemary.
Parsley, sage. All the time. I get it. Thanks for listening.
You be kind to each other.
Bye.